Hey second graders, so this week we're going to do part 1 of a 2-week project that I'm calling Wacky Weavings. We're going to be making weavings out of paper, kind of similar to how we did for Appalachian Market last year in first grade, but we're going to start today by making abstract. Remember, abstract means not a picture. It's all about lines and shapes and colors. We're going to make abstract designs on 2 pieces of paper. So what you need today is 2 pieces of paper and then your choice of coloring material, pencil, marker, pen, color pencils, whatever you have available to you. So let's get started.
Okay, so you can see here I have my Sharpie and my pencil, but you can use any drawing material you have. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw lines around and across my paper. They can go off the page, and you're going to see how they create different shapes. So I did one paper that was curvy lines, and now I have another paper that's zigzag lines. I'm thinking about opposites with my 2 papers. You can do that, or you can do a different idea. It doesn't really matter, but I like how I'm going to weave 2 opposite things together. So I have jagged straight lines and curvy soft lines. Now I got my crayons out. If you have markers, colored pencils, whatever you like to color with that you have available, you can use. You could even paint your paper if you wanted to. For my jagged straight lines, I'm going to go with warm colors. That's the color family I'm going to use. Again, if you have a different idea for something you want to do, that's totally fine. And you're going to see I'm going to do my very best to stay in the lines, and I'm just going to fill my whole paper with color. I'm going to cover the whole thing, so you can see how I go along the edges, and then I fill in the middle. I kind of trace the inside of the edge, and then I fill in the middle all the way to the edge of the paper. Because what I did is my abstract lines created abstract shapes. And now I'm going to color those in to create a design that is interesting. So right now I'm just doing a rough color in. I'm not worrying too much about my craftsmanship at the moment, but you're going to see me add some more layers to it in just a minute. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep covering that whole space. I'm noticing how this shape kind of goes all the way up to the side of my paper because the line has closed it in. I'm thinking about the edge of my paper as the other boundary for this shape. This might take a little bit of training for your eyes to see. What you can see me doing now is going back over some parts where my coloring is a little more messy and going in different directions from how I colored the first time to try to get a more solid color. This is a great way of making sure your craftsmanship is nice. And again, you have a lot of freedom with this to do this how you want, but you want to stick with abstract shapes because what's going to happen is next week we're going to be cutting these papers up and using them as our weaving material. So you don't need to be drawing any kind of picture or something that you would be sad to cut up. So I'm just covering this with color and shapes that are going to be interesting later on in my wacky weaving design. So remember that the warm colors are red, orange, and yellow, and pink falls in that because pink is a red mixed with white. Sometimes it helps to turn your paper around a little bit. So I'm filling in all of this space, and that's going to create my warm color design. Again, notice how I'm turning my paper, going in lots of different directions to help fill in all of that white space. I recommend using plain old printer paper for this. That's what I'm using here. But if all you have is notebook paper, you can absolutely make that work as well. You could even use recycled scrapbook paper or wrapping paper, whatever kind of paper you have laying around. Alright, so I have paper number 1 is pretty much done. It looks like I'm just adding a few finishing touches to make it a little bit neater. And now I'm going to grab my second paper. So this one you can see is opposite. My lines are all very curvy and flowy, and so I'm going to use cool colors for this. Remember, cool colors are blues, greens, and purples. So I'm just going through my crayons and I'm finding some cool colors to use. And I'm going to notice again how I've created some new shapes using my abstract line. I've created all of these different sort of oval and loop-de-loop kind of shapes. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to color those in. So I'm tracing around the edges and filling it in. While I was working on this, I had some music going and it was just a really nice relaxing time. Just coloring. Or if you like to listen to audiobooks, you could listen to an audiobook while you do this. But we're just working those fine motor skills, working on our coloring skills, and preparing our materials for our weaving lesson that we'll do next week. So again, see how I kind of do a rough color first and then I go back over it with additional layers. That's going to help it be neater, especially if you go in the exact opposite direction like I just did on that blue space. That's called cross-hatching. Now I'm going to notice how this shape, it's in the negative space. It means the space around the more obvious shapes, but it's a shape in and of itself. So I'm going all the way to the edge of my paper and noticing how my scribbles created shapes of their own. This is a great eye training exercise for starting to be able to see positive and negative space. I love this color, it's so happy to me. It reminds me of the ocean. So again, notice how I'm going corner to corner, edge to edge, filling in that space. So notice how I kind of fill in the edges. That's a great way to help me. If I have a hard time coloring inside the lines, I can go a little bit messier on the middle if I kind of have that boundary built up for myself around the edges. And then I can go in and clean it up in my second layer. And remember, being able to color in the lines and having those kinds of fine motor skills takes practice. So if you're having a harder time with this than it looks like I'm having, that's okay. It just takes time to teach your hand how to really follow the lines and know where it's going. The more you draw and the more you color, the better you get. So I just have this one more shape, but in a minute what you're going to see me do is I'm going to reach for a Sharpie, because as I was coloring this, I realized that that was a really large space and I actually wanted to be able to have some more purple and green in a few more spots. So I just grabbed my marker and I went through and added a couple more lines so that, one, this blue shape wasn't going to be quite so huge, but also so that I could bring in some extra colors around the edges and make my design more interesting. This is a huge part of being an artist, is understanding when it's time to, in the middle of it, change your mind a little bit and add some edits or change things as you go along. You always want to be responding to your work. What I mean by that is looking at it as you go and adding or editing things as you see fit. Alright, so while I color these last two shapes, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about what we're doing next week. So you're going to want to keep these papers somewhere safe so that you are ready to go next week. It would be really sad if you lost them and didn't have things to weave with. So you've colored these papers, set them aside, put them somewhere safe, and next week we're going to weave them together. We're going to remind ourselves how weaving works using warp and weft papers. And we're going to even talk about how to make our weaving more interesting with designs. So I will see you next week. Put your work somewhere safe. You don't need to send a picture of it or anything to me. This is just part 1, and part 2 will come out for you guys next Tuesday. Great work, guys. I will see you then.